Thanks for downloading this episode of the Nerdball Podcast. Nerdball Podcast is brought to you by, I guess, whatever I want it to be brought to you by, because I'm in my basement. Fort Meg's CrossFit. I was just in touch with the owner yesterday. So I'm not doing stuff there still, again, because football season, it's hard to get there, get stuff set up, editing, all that kind of stuff. But if you are interested in what they have to offer, check out fortmexcrossfit.com. Always supporting Real JP Multimedia. He was a big reason this podcast was able to get started. We originally recorded in his studio, so that's so thanks to Jake for allowing to do that. Check everything out at realjp.com. My guest today talks about her time on a jury for a case that took about a week long that just wrapped up. It was cool. It was interesting to learn about procedural stuff. Also, she was super excited to be on this jury, which maybe some people would question that. But she had a good time. I had a good time listening to it. It's not, I guess the movies and TV, there are a lot of similarities, but it's not all expected. They're not all what you thought it was going to be. So give it a listen. Let me know what you think.
I am Amanda Pilewski, and this is the Nerdball Podcast.
This is the Nerdball Podcast with Lorenzo Melcher.
Awesome. Thanks, Amanda, for coming on the podcast. Thanks for people for downloading the podcast. Real quick at the top, the podcast. I think Amanda, you are my 179th episode. I'm getting close to 200. I don't know what I'm going to do special for 200. I feel like I have to do something besides just interview someone. I totally skipped like 100 and 150, and I didn't really acknowledge it. So I got.
Well, you got to do something for two then.
I know. So I gotta figure that out. It's right around, if everything stays right, and I do 2 episodes per week. I think the 200th episode would be like the Thursday before our reunion. So
that's fun.
I don't know. I gotta figure something out for that. But anyway, please like, share, subscribe, review. Is there, whenever, Amanda, I have trouble saying that phrase. I feel like there's a certain order that people put that in when they say all those things, and I mess it up or I say it weird, and it never sounds right to me. What sounds right to you?
Like, download, and share.
Yeah.
Like, download, share.
What if I don't like people, you know, like subscribe?
Oh, subscribe.
Yeah.
See, I don't do this, so I don't know.
I know, but every time I hear other people say it and it sounds like really good, and then I say it, I'm like, either I'm missing something or I'm putting the words out of order and they don't appear good to my ears. I don't know.
You've just got to find your own way. That's actually things that don't sound good to your own ears. There's actually like an actual term for that. I don't know what it is.
Okay.
But it's the way that language is supposed to flow.
Yeah.
It's like the natural flow of things.
Yeah.
That's why it's like a large red dog instead of a red large dog.
Yeah. Oh, you know what? I remember listening to something like that too about that.
Yes. Yeah. Where it just sounds so unnatural if you do it the wrong way. It's something to do with like the subject and verbs and adjectives and it's beyond the scope of my knowledge at 9:09.
That's all right. Also, I was having issues with my contacts this morning. I have astigmatism, so I have a little weight on the bottom of my contact. And sometimes it takes a while for it to like catch where it's supposed to be. Usually it's only like one. This morning it was both of them. And if they're not sitting right, everything's just a little bit blurry. So I had to like keep rubbing my eyes to get these things to set. And then finally there, right before the podcast started, they both caught where they're supposed to catch. So
I have astigmatism in one of my eyes. I couldn't tell you which because I refused to wear the contact for astigmatism because it never sat. Sat right, and everything felt blurry. So my whole world was all off whenever I wore them.
The cool thing is when I put them in at work or for work in the morning, and one eye isn't working properly, and like then lights look like bursts of light as I'm trying to drive to work at night, or not at night, but before the sun's up. So that's cool.
That's dangerous. I wouldn't recommend that.
It's only one. I just drive with one eye open, and hopefully it sets in.
So you hope for the best.
I can't. No, no. Like I said, I'm glad it worked itself out.
Me too.
So normally I ask people what they nerd out about, but you're on here for something very specific that we talked about yesterday. And as the past few months have gone, you are the you are continuing the run of, oh, do you want to podcast tomorrow, or hey, can you podcast tonight, guests. So but it worked out perfectly, and
It
you're on here
did.
you're on here for a super specific reason, and tell everyone what we talked about yesterday.
I am here, and I guess this would also be my thing that I've nerded out over.
Yeah.
I was on a jury last week that went to trial and all the way through deliberation and verdict in
Yeah.
Wood County.
So this is, most people are like, oh my gosh, you got to actually do it, because people like, I think it's like a thing you're used to seeing people on TV like try to get out of jury duty or anything like that. I I
Yeah,
I want to do it, like, because I've never done it, and now that I say it, I'll probably get a letter in the mail. But like
I hope so.
I think it'd be a cool thing to do. I had a friend of mine
Very
at work.
cool.
Yeah, I had a friend of mine at work that had to do it, but he was on a grand jury, so they listened to a bunch of different things all week, and then they had to take like a tour of the jail or something. But it wasn't like a regular, like what you would think, jury duty.
Yeah, the grand jury is actually what usually starts the criminal cases. You have to have enough for an indictment. You have to be indicted on a criminal charge. And that can only be done when a grand jury is seated. And I know it's different, probably state to state, county to county, but that's how the case that I was on the jury for initiated, like way back in, I think I'm looking over here on my other screen with all
Oh.
some details here. That initiated a direct indictment was initiated in February of 2021,
Oh wow.
and it just went to trial, last week,
Yeah.
which was it started on the 7th of August. So
So when did you get your letter in the mail saying, hey, this is what you got, this is what you're doing?
in July, and
Okay.
they send it out, and it's now like you have to answer some questions, preliminary questions, with updating your contact information, your email address, opting into texts, because now the court will also text you if the case is going forward or not. They will email you. So I, got online and filled out all of my updated information, which was current because I update voter registration, and that's where they pull
Oh
this
yeah.
from. And then you just sort of sit and wait until you get a summons in the mail. And I got an email like 2 weeks later that I had a summons that was mailed, because now like USPS will send you like images of your summons
Uh-huh.
or of your mail that's coming that day. I don't know if you guys have that
No.
at your house, but when we moved into the house that we're currently in, that was one of the like fancy new features.
Like every day or every time you
Yeah,
get
yeah.
mail?
Every day I get like a summary of the mail, unless it's not imaged. So when I got this text
Oh.
notification that my summons was issued, I was like, oh. So I'm like checking my email for the mail to
Yeah.
see, when I was going to have to report, whose courtroom.
Checking my email for the mail.
Yes. And it had been a week. And I was like, I'm still not getting it. And then I finally got it. And I was to report on the 7th at 9 a.m., had to be there and be ready.
This whole time, are you like excited?
Oh yeah. As soon as I got like the first little card in the mail, I was texting like anybody that I've ever told that I wanted to do jury duty, because it's been so long since I got one of those summons cards
Yeah.
that I'm thrilled. Like I think the last one I got is when I was still living with my parents.
Okay.
And it's been a significant amount of time since then. But I've known other people that have gotten their summons, and I'm like, like even in like some people get them in like every other year, and they never have to go forward
Yeah.
to trial.
Yeah.
So you have to either call the number the night before to see if the trial's still going forward, or again with the texts and emails, they will let you know. And I was just so excited. I was checking. I called a couple times over the weekend.
Gosh, it's like you ordered this package and you just can't wait to get it.
That's exactly what this was for me, because this is something that I've wanted to do forever.
I wonder if they thought I don't think we should pick her because she's like seems too excited to be on jury duty.
Now, I did not show my excitement while I was there.
Yeah.
So there is that.
The whole
I
time
had
you're just
my
like, can you believe where this is awesome?
on the inside. That's what I was doing, because I haven't been in a courtroom since I interned with some attorneys back in, I think, 2009,
Mhm. Okay.
maybe 2010. I no 2010.
Yeah.
Um, because I mean, I don't break the law, so like I don't have the opportunity to see the inside of a courtroom from in front of the bar.
Hmm.
So it
All
was
right. So you get your special package. You're ready to go.
yes.
When you get there the first day, when you get to the first day, because I'm just basing all my knowledge on TV and movies. From my
Yeah.
understanding, is there always alternate jurors?
Yes, but before there are even alternate jurors, there's a jury pool.
Oh yeah, giant pool, right? Yeah.
So when I got in and I, signed my name or initialed my name that I had shown up, and they handed me $40. Like, all I had to do was walk into the courthouse, go through security, sign next to my name, and they gave me $40 just for showing up that day,
Yeah.
because that's the current daily juror fee in Wood County. So I'm like, oh, what a good day. Like, I would have done this for free. So I'm sitting in like an atrium in the Wood County courthouse with
Yeah.
a bunch of other people. I'm sort of like scoping out my competition and waiting for the action, to happen. So we were sitting there for about an hour before someone that runs either the courtroom or the jury portion of trials. She came out and called half of our names, and half of us went up and stood in line outside of the jury room. And then they called the other half and they followed up. And I think all in all, there were between 40 and 50 people.
Okay.
And we were on our way to voir dire, which is French for to speak the truth.
Uh-huh.
It's basically when you go into the courtroom and the judge addresses you and asks you questions to try to weed out any
Mm.
problematic people that may be biased without knowing it. He reads off the charges that the defendant is alleged to have committed, just in case, because then there's a question like, have any of you been a victim of this kind of crime? Do you
Oh
know
yeah.
anybody that
Yeah.
has been a victim of this kind of crime? And you have to raise your hand, and because you're all sort of under oath at the time to tell the truth
Yep.
to the judge that is asking you these questions. And there are so many questions. It's such a long process.
As you're hearing other questions or people answer questions, are you like, all right, if he asks me this is how I'm going to do it. Or if the judge
Yes.
asks me this.
I was like, okay, this is how much detail this person went into. So if a question applies to me, this is how much detail I should go into.
And do they like strike them right away? Because I listened to podcasts where I know in certain states, like each side of lawyers says, no, we don't want that person, but you only get to do it so many times.
Right. Each side has a certain number of challenges for no cause whatsoever. Like,
Yeah.
you might not like, as an attorney, you might not like someone's shirt, and you'd be like, I don't want him on the jury. But none of that was done while we were in the room. So
Okay.
the judge asked us the questions, and then once the judge asked, it was turned over to counsel for the plaintiff and counsel for the defendant.
Mm-hmm.
And I guess the plaintiff is just the state of Ohio in this
Yeah.
matter,
Okay.
because it's criminal. And they asked, more targeted questions, because that form that we filled out listed some information about us, like where we worked, what we did for a living,
Mm-hmm.
just basic demographics. and they get all those sheets of paper. So you can see them like flipping through all these pieces of paper as people are answering questions so they can take their notes. And
Yeah.
they also had like a spreadsheet of we were all in a specific order because we were all assigned like a reporting number, I think. So that if they didn't catch our name, they still knew based on where we were seated, where we were on this map. So I saw a couple people get like crossed out. I was like, oh, I hope that wasn't me, but I'm like, I didn't talk. So I'm trying to be as neutral and calm and chill as I possibly can be. And that's hard for me when I'm excited. So
Yes, I've watched you while you watch a Bills game. I'm well aware of it.
Yeah. So once voir dire was completed, the judge told us, hey, you can't discuss the case with anybody. You can't post on social media. Don't do any of that. Like, you're going to go back into the juror room, use the restroom, grab a snack while we sort of deliberate over the choices. And so then behind closed doors, it was only the judge and counsel that was privy to the actual jury selection.
Okay.
So we're all just standing there milling about because there's a lot of us, and the jury room can only comfortably seat, I think maybe 20 people, and there was at least double that. So I'm just like standing up against like what would be a closet if there was a door, but a coat rack, and I'm just like, my head's just resting on it, and I'm like, okay, like let's do this. And so then you see the woman that's in charge of all of this. She comes out and she's like, if I call your name, step forward.
Now, I would wait for you to get to this point, because I know like when you watch any like singing competitions or anything like that, and like America's Got Talent or American Idol or anything, and they bring groups of people like right away from we're watching, you're like, oh, they didn't. If this person's in this group, then the whole group's out. So like, is any of that in your mind where you're like, where you kind of like lined people up to be like, oh, I don't think that person made it, so I'm hopefully I'm not in their group of people.
Unfortunately, I didn't know who these people were. Like, I didn't know everybody's name. There was only the people that were like in my immediate area that like my mind recognized. And they were only using our first names, which was also very weird, but I don't think there were any repeats. And if there were, they threw out a last name. But they were getting to the very end of the list. So out of this 40 to 50 people, they were selecting 12 jurors and 2 alternates.
Okay.
So there was 14 people out of this list. And I think that they called me like 11th.
Like, did you know like, hey, the people they're calling, these are going to be the jurors, or you still didn't know like what this group meant?
I still didn't know what this group meant.
Okay.
But when she stopped at a couple people after me, and she said, you've all been selected, the rest of you, can grab your things and we'll walk you out. I was like, oh, I made it here.
I would imagine there's you on that side and there's other people also on the jury like, gosh dang it, I do not want to be here.
Oh yeah, it was me. Like there was one juror that during voir dire, they ask if you have anything going on in your life that may get in the way of you being on this jury, because they had anticipated 5 days for trial.
Yeah.
And one of the women, she's a stay-at-home mom, and she said that right before any of this, like in the voir dire when the judge was talking. And she was like, well, I have, a kid that's have 2 kids under 3, and I'm a stay-at-home mom. I'm their primary caretaker. Then the next question, of course, was, well, are you able to, find alternate childcare? And she's like, well, yeah. And the judge was like, well, would that be a financial hardship? And she was like, no. I'm like, why you didn't want to be here?
Yeah.
You should have said yes. And then they would have gotten rid of you, because that's a valid reason not to serve on a jury, a financial hardship.
So she was picked.
She was on the jury. But it was just, and so for her, when her name was called, I was like, oh, She was I think the first name called.
Oh man, oh yeah.
And I was just like, oh. But again, they're trying in this jury selection to get, a jury of peers. They're trying
Yeah.
to get it as diverse as they possibly can when you're pulling all of these jurors from Wood County, Ohio.
Yeah.
It's,
Yeah.
it's not the most diverse group of voters here.
Yep.
Oh, you kind of have to get what you kind of get what you get.
Yeah. Yeah. So
And
after this process, um how do they decide, or is it decided already who the alternates are going to be?
so you don't know the entire time you're sitting on that jury that you are an alternate juror.
Oh, so the whole trial, the whole
The
time?
whole trial, you sit through,
Oh.
because I don't know if it's like this everywhere, but you have to think about it. If you know that you're an alternate and you know that you're not going to get to deliberate, are you going to pay as much
You're
attention?
right. Yep. Yep.
And so
It's good. That's a good way to do it
we
though.
so we didn't know who the alternates were until the end of closing arguments. Both sides had rested their cases. There was nothing more to be done other than to deliberate.
So in this case, the the only juror for sure that they know they're not the alternate is the foreman, or even.
No, there is not a foreman until they've eliminated the alternates, and
Oh, so
you
it's not till
are
the end.
it's not till the end.
Oh,
Yeah.
okay,
Yeah.
okay, okay.
So it's
That's
so
pretty
it's
cool.
like so anybody could go home as the alternate at the end of it,
Ah,
and you don't know. It's all very procedural,
yeah,
and they do that to ensure a fair trial and
yeah.
impartial jury. And it was it was really cool. It was very nerve-wracking that last day. So just this past Friday, when it was time to announce the alternates, and the judges, we were all in the room before, and we were talking about, like, oh, I wonder who's going to be the alternate. I wonder who's going home. And one guy was right. He's just sitting there, and he's very deadpan, and he was very funny, and I enjoyed his presence. But he said, he's like, I'm going home. And he was right. So when the judge said, juror blah 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 and juror blah blah blah, you two were randomly selected as
Yeah.
the alternates, and you are free to leave. So while court is essentially in session, they had to get up from the jury box and walk out. They had to get their things from the jury room, and then they were walked out.
Yeah.
And then the rest
Wow.
of us were given some additional instructions for the deliberation. And then we were dismissed to the jury room
All
for
right.
those deliberations.
So let's back up to the
Yeah.
first day of actual trial. First of all, I would imagine, because I know you, I feel like you went through multiple pages of paper and multiple just taking notes after note after note. But what the first day, is there any part of, I know like you're excited to be there, but is there any part of this that is boring? Like, because you're there for 5 days.
Yes, and no. It's a different kind of boring. Like, waiting in line at Cedar Point to ride a roller coaster. The line part is boring, but you'll gladly sit or stand through that
Yeah.
to get to the good stuff. And again, trial and the courtroom have always just fascinated me. So I thought it was a huge privilege just to be a part of it. So I tried to embrace all of it. So I was never really bored.
Okay.
I was just sitting there, judging the people that were making me bored.
um did it come up, or I guess they didn't see an issue if it did come up, the fact that you are a paralegal?
So yes, one of the questions during voir dire that the judge asked, this is so funny. For me, it's not gonna be funny for anybody else, but that's fine.
All
He
right.
was like, has anybody know anybody that works as a lawyer, that works in the court system, that is an attorney, that works in a law office. And, a few hands go up because it's really hard to not know somebody
Yeah.
in some
Yeah.
capacity.
The phrasing of that question leads to should be multiple hands going up.
Exactly. And that's what they're trying to do. They're trying to phrase all the questions in a way that just gets to all this information.
Yeah.
So, I raise my hand and eventually like the judge calls on me and I'm just like, don't forget where you work. And he's like, what is your connection to a law firm or an attorney or whatever? And I was like, well, I'm an intellectual property assistant at Shoemaker, Loop and Kendrick. And he's like, and what does that mean? I was like, I work for patent and trademark attorneys. And he looks me in the eye and he goes, Doug Miller? And I was like, yep. And then we had like a little chuckle because of course Doug knows everybody.
And that's your boss, right?
Yeah. And everybody knows Doug.
Yeah.
So I was just like, I'm sitting there and I'm like, oh my gosh, if Doug is the reason that I don't get picked for this. Because there's 1 degree of separation from the judge, but thankfully, here I am. And then I was like, well, how deep do I have to go into my legal history? Because I worked for attorneys prior to working at Shoemaker.
Yeah.
And I came from a bigger firm prior to that. So I was just like, I don't know. I answered the question. That was my connection. And I figured if anybody wanted to know further, you don't just start working in intellectual property. That's not where people normally start their legal assisting careers.
Well, you answered the question, and like you said, if they were like, all right, and prior to that, would you, if they asked that?
Exactly, but they didn't. And so, I've always been told, don't offer information.
No.
In a legal setting, you answer the question that was asked. You don't want to overshare.
And sometimes you don't even do that. So
right.
In that case, you had to. But
yeah.
Can you plead the fifth in jury selection? Can you just not answer questions?
I have no idea. Nobody did.
Yeah. Because you can't. I mean, you can when you're on the stand, right? You say, I plead the 5th, right? I wonder if you could just do that, because then you're not like, if you don't want to be there, you're not necessarily making something up or trying to act weird or lying. You're just saying, right. I refuse to answer.
Yeah.
Interesting.
That's interesting. I'm gonna. I wrote it down. I'm gonna research it.
Nice. All right. I've
been doing a lot of researching since Friday, because I was prohibited from researching anything about the case once I was selected to be on the jury.
Do they take your devices away? Well, I guess you don't get put up anywhere though, do you? You just go home.
You go home. Well, see, the thing is depending on the type of case that it is, not all juries are sequestered.
Yeah. Okay.
So like if there's a reason, and I don't know what that would be, but there have been instances where juries are sequestered and they get told to go home, pack a bag.
Yeah.
And then they take them to, a hotel and keep them there until the end of the trial. But that was not the case here. But they did. They did eventually take our devices away from us during deliberations. They came in with a big bowl. And they said, all right, this is for your phones.
A bowl of phones.
And anything that you have on you that can connect to the internet or connect to the outside world.
Wow. So you're going through trial. Is there first of all, can you say what this case was?
I can now. And it was the state of Ohio versus Linda Green. And it was a case that involved felony counts of tampering with records, prohibited acts and practices for charities, and theft. So.
All right. So as you're going through this trial, you're there for 5 days. Are there times, And I don't know. I'm assuming you're keeping notes and you're like, oh, maybe she's guilty. Oh, maybe she's not. Like the whole time you're like probably thinking like that, I would imagine, right? Or are you just taking information in and just letting that go until the end?
Um, it's really hard not as a human not to make a snap judgment about a person.
Yeah.
So, as you listen to all of the evidence and the witnesses that are put on the stand, to enter that evidence, it's hard not to form an opinion. So you can have like a personal opinion, but you try not to let that reflect the facts
Mm-hmm.
because feelings aren't facts. So it's hard to separate once you're finally in that situation. But as you hear from more witnesses and learn more about the goings on when you're there,
Yeah.
that's the information that you have to judge with. You have the prosecution who has the burden of proof. So it's the prosecution side that has to prove to you, the juror, beyond a reasonable doubt that the defendant is guilty of what she was charged with.
Mm-hmm.
The defense is not obligated, which I think is crazy. The defense is not obligated to provide a defense. They could almost not say a single word and just leave it all to the prosecution.
Yeah, because it's that thing like innocent until proven guilty. So the prosecution
Correct.
that's their job, is to prove that
Yeah.
this person was guilty.
Yeah, like the defense team and the defendant could just, kick back in their chairs and sit there and let the whole thing play out.
Mm-hmm.
And not say a word.
Mm-hmm.
Um,
That's not a very good defense, but
it's definitely not a very good defense. And I don't think that the defense, what they did do, I don't think it was nearly adequate enough.
Mm.
And I thought the prosecution did a fantastic job of presenting the case in a way that was easy to understand. And it's like, well, here, we're laying it all out. Here's what she was alleged to have done. Here's evidence that backs up, that claim. Here's some more evidence. Here's some more evidence. And once the prosecution rested, then the case was all for, the defense. And some of the witnesses that the defense team called may as well have been prosecution witnesses.
Jeez.
They did it, like, they did a terrible job, a very terrible job. I was just like, at one point they had Miss Green and her charity's accountant on the witness stand, and he did such a bad job. I feel like he was afraid to answer some questions because they would maybe, make him liable for action, because he didn't do a good job. But that it is what it is. But like, I would have never put these people on, because as soon as then the prosecution had a cross-examination, they buried him.
And these witnesses, it's not like they're surprised they're getting called. Like they know they're, and they talk to them prior to, like, all right, here's what's gonna happen, here's what we're gonna do. And so to be a bad witness is pretty bad.
You should never put anybody on the stand if you don't know what they're going to say. You should never ask a question that you don't already know the answer to.
Yeah. Like,
I feel like that's like lawyering 101, but apparently not.
Yeah.
And that's, they had garbage, I think, to work with. Like there was bad record keeping, there was bad everything. There was bad everything. It just didn't work out. I know that there were, well, I didn't know at the time, but I know now from doing my research that they turned down some plea bargains.
Okay.
And everything, and they definitely shouldn't have done that. And I guess I should say, I can talk about this now. I was released from any kind of rule to not talk about it. And then we did, the jury did find the defendant guilty on all 4 counts. So I can talk about, the case like this in terms of, I'm not showing bias by saying that the defense did a bad job.
Yeah. Well, that's basically what you and all the other jurors came up with is like, all right, who, I mean, you're basically saying who won, right?
Right.
Who did the best? This is who won, and this is what's going to happen.
Yeah.
Go ahead.
And it wasn't just personal judgments
Correct.
that did this. We actually were presented with all of the evidence, and we would not check the guilty box on the paperwork
The charges, yeah.
until it was time to judge
Yeah.
to judge her guilt. And those now are all a matter of public record, and I'm like, I filled that out.
When you talked about plea deals, and I've seen enough where the lawyers can strongly suggest like that you should take this plea deal, and it's up to their client to be like yes or no, and if they say no, like all right, well, I guess this is what we're doing. And sometimes those people just think that they're gonna win and not be found guilty, and that's just what happens. So
not for everyone. Yeah, I feel like it would have worked better for the defendant had she taken a plea deal. I mean, and I don't know what they were. I just know that any chance to resolve this case short of trial was rejected.
Yeah, and plea deals are always better than the potential outcome of going to trial, whatever that outcome may be. Yeah.
Yes. It's always just a little better. So it's instead of pleading guilty to murder one, you get manslaughter.
Yeah.
It's still, it means sort of the same thing, but it comes with a lesser sentence.
Yeah. You're there 5 days. How long are your days? Are they like 8-hour days or 10-hour days?
It was really weird. The first day was an all day thing. I think we were dismissed around 4:00 and we were there at 9. The second, third, and fourth days we were not there past 4:00. There was something, and I still don't know what it is, but it's driving me crazy. Like when, Your Honor, may we approach? So after the prosecution's fourth or fifth witness was called, they did the Your Honor, may we approach? And like they looked a little like frantic. And I was like, ooh, what's going on? And so it's like you wonder what that drama is across the restaurant.
Yeah.
You wonder what's going on across the street at your neighbors. and unfortunately, they're all very good at whispering in hushed tones, like all up by the judge. But I think that something was going on with one of the witnesses for the prosecution. I'm not sure who it was because we weren't provided a visual list. We were only told who the potential witnesses would be in case we had any conflicts with those people.
Got it.
But they were looking like something was going on, and we were dismissed really early one day, like probably by 1:00, and that's very early because we were told to prepare for some later days.
Yeah.
And of course that was on a day that I already had dinner plans in Bowling Green. So I was like, well, I'm not gonna
So you just had to sit.
I was like, perfect. So I went home and chilled on the couch for a bit, and then drove back down to BG late at that night. But I've been in BG quite a bit this last week, more than I have been cumulatively in 10 years.
Do they feed you while you're there?
No, with one exception. We have like a fridge. They have snacks.
Yeah.
So like there's always something available for us there. But when we are dismissed for lunch, we're issued the same, don't talk about the case, don't research anything independently, don't do any of this. And people could leave to go grab lunch. We usually had about an hour, never less than an hour. Sometimes it would be more, like they'd be like, yeah, we're going to meet back here promptly at 1:00, and it's 20 after 1, and still nothing, because there's a lot that goes on either in chambers or just in open court that the jury doesn't need to be there for, because it's not evidence, it's not testimony, it's it's a different motion, it's something procedural. And so we'd just be sitting there like twiddling our thumbs and taking an extra bathroom break, because you don't know then how long it is until your next break.
Yeah, what if
Even
you have
though
to go?
the
Yeah, what if you have to go to the bathroom? Like,
So the judge did say at the beginning that he was going to try to make it to where if you need a bathroom break, he was going to break us for at least 15 minutes every 2 hours.
okay,
He was very good about doing that, even if he had to cut off a portion of a question if there was an objection, and then they would like bicker back and forth about it.
yeah,
So that worked. So that worked out really well. But if at any point you needed anything, you were just to like raise your hand, and one of the court workers, I would assume, would come in and sort of interrupt and see what it was that you needed. But nobody had to do that.
like,
If you're
like raise your hand, like, yeah, I got to poop really bad. Excuse me, sir.
I couldn't imagine. But like, but as time went on with it, and you're getting closer and closer to the end, your nerves, like it's natural for people to be nervous and have anxiety about it. And I didn't see this. I heard it from one of the other jurors, because I was trying only to look at whoever was talking.
Mm-hmm.
I was trying not to, gawk around the courtroom. I was trying not to stare down the defendant to see if I could elicit something from her. I wasn't trying to like bore holes into any one person. So whoever was, speaking is who I was looking at. But I guess that at one point during closing arguments, the defendant wanted to get up to go to the bathroom, and her attorney was like, sit down.
Oh, really?
Yeah, because like it's very disrespectful.
Yeah, she just got up.
I guess she stood up and wanted to go to the bathroom, and he's like, you have to wait. Like, whoa. Like, what are you doing? And you'd see the attorneys, because there was 2 attorneys on each side that were trying the case, and you'd see them get up every now and then and leave and then come back, and everybody's taking notes and passing notes. But yeah, like if you needed a break, you could get one, because they provided you with notebooks to take notes. They provided you with pens.
And you're like, first of all, this notebook, garbage. This pen, it's like the worst pen you've ever seen. Like, because you write and you use like all these certain things.
Yeah. I did end up bringing my own pen. But I bought a notebook specifically for notes. And I couldn't use it. And then this is the most horrible thing.
Oh, yeah.
You couldn't take your notes with you.
Wait, what do you mean? Oh, like after everything's over?
After everything was over, like you had to leave your notebook.
Oh,
in the court. You had to leave it in the courtroom whenever you left.
Yeah.
And then after deliberations, you had to leave it there for the bailiff to destroy.
Dang.
I was like, and for me, like I can't get rid of things that I've written. Like that's like, what if I needed this for my memoir? Now there's no record of it.
Well, now you have this podcast.
I have this podcast and some of my own personal.
Oh, okay.
My own personal notes. Like this was my first day fit.
Oh, you have a picture of yourself in your notebook?
Yeah.
Oh my gosh.
Because I wore my good luck that's hearsay shirt.
Oh.
From the Johnny Depp trial underneath my button down for jury selection.
Yeah.
And I even noted in my notebook the first hearsay objection that I heard.
Yeah.
It was so good. Like on the inside, I was like,
and you just go like this and just show your t-shirt. Like, wait a minute.
It was so good. But yeah, also now all my notes are destroyed.
That's
and
right.
only the verdict forms remain. But that's okay. I've been writing down and recapping, just for myself.
Yeah.
So
So you get to the end. And we already talked about those two people leaving, saying, "All right, you guys are no longer needed. You're alternates."
Yes.
And then we're kind of burying the lead, but where? So then how do you decide who the foreman's going to be? If someone just be like,
So,
"I'll do it."
so you're supposed to vote on a foreman.
Mm-hmm.
And so once, like, we weren't allowed to talk about the case until the bailiff shut the jury room door, because after the trial, we were ushered in there. They collected our phones, all of our devices that connected to the outside world. And then they're like, don't talk about the case. You cannot start deliberations until we close this door. So then they brought in all of the evidence. They brought in a computer for us to view some of the evidence that was on a flash drive. They brought in, each of us had like a jury instruction form. One of the documents is jury instructions, and that lists through the charges and then sort of the A, B, C, D of the elements of that charge. And so we all had that. It all had definitions of some of the language that was in there. And then there were the verdict forms, which are public record. And if I knew how to share my screen, I could show you some.
That's all right.
But those are the forms where it's just like, we, the jury, as to this charge, find the defendant, and then you check a box, guilty, not guilty. And then it's sort of like, if you selected this, move on to step 2. If you selected this, turn the page. Like, so it basically, they basically made these things idiot proof. So they gave it to us. They went over it. They told us if we had any questions, we were to write the questions down, knock on the door. The bailiff would open the door and take our question. So these were all just like procedural things. So that's crazy. So once the door is shut in, we're like, well, we have to elect a 4-person. And they're like, first off, I mean, does anybody want to do it? I'm like, whoop.
Yeah, I was just gonna ask that.
So my hand went up and nobody else's did. And then they were like, okay, who votes for Amanda? And then everybody else raised their hand. So then I was now in charge of sort of like the preservation of the evidence to make sure that nothing happened to it.
Yeah.
And then I was responsible for filling out the verdict forms.
Mm-hmm.
And so then, since I had like a legal background from an assistant point of view, not from an actual practicing point of view, because I can't give legal advice. I can only, my opinion of this is, because I am, a regular person. We went through the jury instructions, which contain the charges and all the elements of that charge, line by line. And, I made sure that everybody understood anything. I was trying to look everybody in the eye to see a feel for like if somebody felt pressured into making a decision.
Yeah.
And like because that's my biggest thing is I was like, no person in here can pressure you into a response. Like, if you don't feel comfortable with this, let's talk about it. Let's talk about why you're confused about this, or let's talk about what part of this you don't understand. And then we as the jury, we all sort of, I would read everything out loud. I would read the definitions out loud, give people a time to read it themselves, think about things. And then we would share in turn, if you had an opinion or had something to say about it, why we thought that this specific charge and this specific element of that charge was satisfied by the evidence that we were presented. Because we were dealing with a pretty big charity that helped with like disaster relief and medical bills for children and things like that. So on a personal level, for a lot of us, it was a difficult thing to sit here and be like, well, it's obvious this woman has done a lot of good, but that doesn't negate the fact that something that she did satisfied the elements of this charge, which is a crime. And so we had to keep reminding all of ourselves that, we're not judging her, the person, and what her charitable works were. We're judging and determining if she was guilty or not of the crimes that she was, accused of.
Yeah.
So that was hard. And so making sure that everybody felt comfortable with everything. And we ended up deliberating 4 hours, just over 4 hours. And we're just like, is that too short? Like, should we have done
You
better?
don't know.
Because
Yeah.
like for me, there was one part. I'm gonna pull it up.
What?
Pull it up.
Why you
Here.
pull that up? It's like when you're taking a test in school and you finish really early. You're like, all right, am I really stupid or really smart? Like, is this? So you wait, like you wait just to see who else turns their test in first.
Yes, but we were the only one.
Yeah, yeah.
There was nothing to judge it
Yeah.
by, you know. So but again, for each individual element of this, we went through, like, everyone, you had to prove that it was between the years 2011 and 2018.
Mm-hmm.
Check. You had to prove that it happened in Wood County, Ohio. Like, check, or we wouldn't have made it this far into trial.
Mm-hmm.
The next one was who the defendant was. And it's like, well, yes, they've got that. But then it got into more of the elements of the actual offense.
Yeah.
And that's where, we really had to talk about it. And I wasn't going to be satisfied checking a box to move on to the next one until, with my own eyes, I saw proof of that.
Yeah.
Because that was a real sticking point for me. And that's what I was telling, everybody else. I was like, I need to see it with my own eyes. I can't just take someone's word for it until I've seen it in their report. Like, they can tell me all day that they wrote this specific thing in their report, and they were entered as an expert witness because there were, like, certified forensic examiners or investigators. And that's what they did. They did a line by line audit of 13 bank accounts and a bunch of credit cards. And they, spent a lot of time doing that. And I'm like, we can't feasibly do that. None of us are certified at this.
Yeah.
But I was like, but I need to find in that expert's report where he says this specific number was suspicious and why it was suspicious before I could, agree to it. Because there was some of these where, for like the charge of theft, since we did find her guilty, we also had to check a box where if the amount we thought was less than $1,000, more than 1,000 but less than 7,500, 7,500 to 150,000, or $150,000 or more but less than 750,000. and the first fraud examiner said $660,000, and we saw her numbers. And then we saw the second one, who was $440,000, because he gave her the benefit of the doubt for some of the personal charges and personal monies that she used of the charity.
Yeah.
Or that she allegedly did use. And there were just some things on there that I'm like, no, like, we don't think that, the landscaping to keep up this house that she lived in and hosted, foreign children that were coming from other countries, like, the landscaping, that's fine. That's something that the charity should pay for, because the charity owns the home. And if she wasn't living there, people would still be using that home for charitable purposes. And we did the same thing with, like, the pool and a few other charges. Like, she had some animals, and we're like, that could be a tricky thing. But we gave her credit for a lot more. I think our number, like our fraud number or theft number, was like $175,000.
Okay.
But I was like, I need to do that math based on this expert witness's testimony before I feel comfortable, with this number. Because there was one number that dealt with, like, reimbursements from the charity. Like, she was writing checks from the charity to her, but she was the only signer on the account.
Oh.
And there was a lot of commingling of funds and just not good business practices. And in this situation, against the law for some of the things that she did there was no proof of why she had those reimbursements. And I was like, you guys, like, I am not comfortable with this $75,000 or 76,000 and change, because I need to see it with my own eyes. And I was like, I know it's not feasible for me to look at all these bank records because there's
Yeah.
thousands of pages, but I like looked through that expert's report and I found what I needed. He said that in his doing this, like he found reimbursements in that $76,000 amount that had no corresponding expenses from her personal account.
Hmm.
So
So
they
it
were,
looks like she just took that money and not they
yes,
weren't reimbursement.
right. And there were things on there, for Talbots and Chico's and Brighton
Yeah.
collections and clearly women's stores.
Hmm.
These weren't, you weren't doing that for the children, like you were doing that for you.
Yeah.
And it's unfortunate that none of the like experts in her life, like her accountant or any of her board members, held her to a higher standard for record keeping.
Yeah.
But that doesn't change the fact that, what she did wasn't lawful.
Was there ever any pushback from the other jurors? Not necessarily like they're mean about it, but like you want to like see all these things and read these things and I would imagine there might be some other jurors like, all right, yeah, did you hear? This is clearly what happened. Let's move on.
There was one, and he was getting snippy, and I'm just like, and I was finally like, listen, I was like, would you be upset if you were on trial and someone was saying the things that you're saying to me in the jury room?
Yeah.
Like, oh, just skip it and move on. It's obvious. I was like, well, no. He's like, I would be upset. I wouldn't want that. And I'm like, okay.
Yeah.
So then just stop. Like, we're
Yeah.
gonna go over this. Like, you don't get to decide. It's like, and so he was a little annoying in that aspect in terms of like it's not that obvious. Like I just need to see the proof for myself. Like before I can, judge another person, I have to see it. I have to see that proof to satisfy, my own soul so I can
Yeah.
sleep.
Yeah.
I can't, this woman, and again, we didn't know how many years she was facing. We didn't know anything about like her prior like arrest record. We knew none of that going into this. And
Hmm.
I was like, and I don't know what the penalties are for these things. I was like, so before, we check that guilty box and we check that dollar value, I'm going to damn well make sure that I have given this woman the benefit of the doubt and some time to actually, see these things for myself. If you don't need that, that's fine. But I need that.
Yeah. Yeah.
And there were some other people around the table that also needed that. There were a couple women that you could tell were more church going and more like volunteer friendly
Hmm.
than others, and that's not a bad thing, but they were not confused, but they were held back by some of the language. Like some of it was like that she recklessly did these things. It's like, well, what does recklessly mean? It doesn't
Yeah.
necessarily mean what you think it means. And so, we'd read the definition and then I would, in my own words would be like, well, here's what it means to me. When I read this as an ordinary, reasonable person, this is what I think. And here's how I would apply it to a situation in my life.
Hmm.
And I was like, if you have any more questions about it, we can write down our question and ask for some further clarification. And most of the time, between me and a couple other more outspoken people on the jury panel, we were able to make it make sense. And then
Did
she
you?
was like, oh, okay, I understand that.
So you didn't have to do any secret knocks for the bailiff to come do questions, or
We did one.
okay.
Um, we we were given a flash drive with all of the like bank account information on it.
Hmm.
And I was like, okay, so for one of the things, like the total needed to be greater than $37,500. And I was like, okay, I've got to see with my own eyes that something in this spreadsheet adds up to that. So we were trying to make a total at the bottom of the column of like 1,500 line items of like $10, $20. So not something that you could just
Yeah.
easily, math. and we couldn't get the spreadsheet to do this math for us. And so we knocked, and the bailiff came in, and he was like, wait, what are you trying to do? I was like, we just need to do the math for this. And he's like, and he was just looking to see if it was like a quick button that we weren't seeing. And he's like, yeah, like you can write your question down and give it to me. Or you can just, figure something else out. I was like, that's fine. So I ended up like, I'll open a different account and see if I can do it with that. And I was able to do it in like 30 seconds. And I was like, okay. I was like, I now see that this total is like over $50,000 here. So definitely satisfied, check. And so everybody, it was nice. Everybody was on the same page. Everybody felt comfortable because between each charge with the whole guilty thing, I didn't make them. I asked everybody to go around the table and just be like, guilty.
Yeah.
To sort of cast your vote that way. Because I was like, you have to be comfortable saying it out loud. You can't just raise your hand or nod your head, or if you don't agree with this, no, you have to say it. This is how we're all going to be able to get past this and sleep at night.
So
Yeah.
When you were doing all that, was everyone basically like, yep, guilty? Or was there any like not guilties and then you had to go through it and figure it out?
We did not have one not guilty on any part of this. And we were hoping that there was a place to like fill out a value or a dollar amount. So a couple of us like had scribbled it in our jury instructions or on a couple of the other verdict forms in the event that somebody saw them and would say, hey, I saw this form, or I saw in their notes that they weren't, they didn't think as the jury that you were responsible for nearly $500,000. They got their number down to like 175,000. So it wasn't as bad as everybody said, but there wasn't a place for that. So maybe she'll listen to your podcast and be like, oh, they were, they did put thought in. And
yeah.
The judge came to talk to us and was like, oh yeah, the counsel for the state and the defendant will be around, when I'm done with them in the courtroom, if you wanted to talk to anybody. I'm just like, and say what? Good job.
What if the judge walked in and be like, all right, good job, everyone. You're done here. And as accordance with the law, here are your lollipops. And they just hand you all lollipops for working the case.
Well, we did so every morning when we got there, we had to sign a sheet. And as we signed in, they gave us $40. So we got paid $40 a day to be there. And on the last day, the accountants, the court accountants, they weren't up there at the time. And the bailiff came in and he was like getting ready to like lead us in. And someone came and was like, we can't go in yet. They haven't been paid.
Oh.
So we couldn't go in because again, procedure.
Yeah.
All the T's needed to be crossed and the I's dotted. So we all had to be paid for it before we went in. And
wow.
And on the last day, they bought us lunch.
Nice.
They asked us if we had any like dietary restrictions or allergies, and a couple people were like, "Where are we getting food from?" And she's like, "I don't know. We don't know where we're ordering from yet." And as she's walking out, a couple people were like, "Polly-eyes."
Yeah. What'd you end up getting?
Polly-eyes.
Oh, did you? Oh, nice.
Yeah, so we had a bunch of stuffed breadsticks, and that was
perfect.
I haven't had that for years.
Oh, really? Wow.
Yeah. And so that was very exciting.
So, four-person, before we go, is there anything else you wanted to mention before we're done here?
Don't commit crimes. If you have a charity, keep expense reports.
Run it correctly.
And run it correctly. And there's ways for people who donate money, because this is one of the problems. Like charities that are nonprofit, so if they're a 503c corporation, they're not required to pay taxes.
Yes. Okay.
Any taxes. So like they have a big property on River Road, no property taxes. They have property in Levis Commons, no property taxes. So they're required to fill out these forms that say, how much money was coming in and then how much money was going out and what those expenses were.
Mm-hmm.
And you can see these forms. I think they're 990s, and then there's charity should also provide additional forms, so you can see where the money's going.
Mm-hmm.
Like you can see how much the salary of the CEO is, how much the board members are getting. So you know that even though this is a nonprofit, that people that are involved in a charity can still take money.
Yeah.
And Linda Green did not take money, but she was still compensated, and she didn't.
Uh-oh. Wait, we froze. We're wrapping up, Amanda. Well, maybe she'll come back on. Maybe she won't. I don't know what's happening. Let's pause. Hi.
I don't know what happened.
I don't know either.
You like froze on my screen and then my computer stopped working. Oh wait, what?
Cats were playing and they knocked into the rubber.
The cats disconnected our internet.
Oh, nice. Okay. All right. Well, we'll wrap this up real quick. You were mentioning about Linda Green not like keeping finances and her getting compensated, but
Yes.
not doing it properly.
Yeah, she didn't do it properly, and so it made it look like if her charity was earning $5 million every year, they were using that $5 million for the purpose of the charity.
Got it.
So when in fact, like she wasn't taking any compensation and she didn't list that, but her compensation was she was living in the house that the charity owned.
Okay.
She wasn't paying rent. She didn't have to pay to drive a car. She had no expenses. And then that's okay, but you have to claim that in some way. She kept information from her accountant. Like her accountant knew of 3 or 4 bank accounts, and there were 13.
Oh my.
There were I lost count of how many credit cards there were, but I know there were 6 different American Express accounts. I believe there were 6 different American Express accounts in the charity's name. And there were a lot of personal purchases either on those, or she would use charity money from those accounts to pay her personal credit cards. And so as a consumer or as somebody that wants to donate, you can check the status of a 503c corporation, which is the nonprofit, online. If there's not a link directly on their website, you can look at the IRS. I think you can look at the Ohio Attorney General Charitable Division, but there's ways so you can see that. That's why you can see like that some CEOs from big charities are pulling in millions of dollars in salary.
Yeah.
Which is okay because at least they account for that. But if you want, 90% of your dollar to go towards actually helping people, then you need to make sure you're finding charities where the CEO or the president and the board isn't making a ton of money, because then you see where that money's going.
Yeah.
So that would be my takeaway from that. If you can't donate directly to somewhere, do the research. Like I donate, and that was my plan with my jury fees, because I had so much fun, is I'm donating it to a couple different animal rescues.
Oh, nice. Okay.
So,
well, good.
And I know that, when I click that link on their Facebook, it's going right to their PayPal account, and then they can use that for whatever they want, because that's my intention.
Yeah. Yeah.
It's not my intention for the money that I'm using, to go towards somebody's rent of their personal apartment, or something like that. So
check on your charities.
Check on your charities, because some of them are not as charitable as you would think.
Yeah. Well, Amanda, thanks for coming on. That was a cool story. I'm glad you had fun. I'm glad you liked it. There's gonna be some people that are like, wait, what? I don't.
Thanks for having me.
Yeah. Yeah. So
I'm so excited that I can finally talk about it and research it, because I was prohibited from doing so. And if you know me at all, you know that I research everyone and everything. So
well, good. Well, I'm glad you can do all that.
Absolutely.
All right. Well, thanks again for coming on.
Yeah, thank you for having me.
All right. Thanks to Amanda Pilewski for joining me on the podcast today and talking all about the Linda Green case and her being on the jury, her being foreperson for the jury. I thought it was funny that I knew she was going to be excited to do it, and her when someone asked who wants to be the foreperson, her hand shot up to say, "Yep, I'll do it." But it was cool to listen to all that. Cool to listen to, excuse me, cool to listen to just all the procedural stuff, what goes into it, how deliberations went. It was for someone on the inside as opposed to just us watching something or, reading an article. It was cool to hear the firsthand experience from somebody actually going through it. So thanks again to Amanda for coming on. Please rate, review, subscribe. That sounds right. Rate, review, subscribe. I think I nailed it. I think that's all right. To this podcast, wherever you're listening to it, check out YouTube. We're getting more views on our videos now. It's not like they're in the hundreds, but it's usually only a couple. Now we're getting sometimes 15, 20 views, so that's pretty cool. So check out the YouTube page. Just search the Nerdball Podcast. All over, all kinds of different players. Just search the Nerdball Podcast. If it's not on something that you listen to and you're watching this on YouTube and you're like, hey, I'd rather listen to this, let me know, and I can make sure that the Nerdball Podcast is getting out to everyone. Thanks for always listening. Thanks for being a part of it. Wait, now I don't remember. Like, review, subscribe. Oh man, I think I'm gonna have to re-listen to this. Anyway, do all that. Help this podcast grow. I'm getting up to 200 episodes now, so I got to think of something cool to do for 200. Anyway, thanks to Real JP Multimedia, Cuttlefish Graphics, Big Daddy Graphics, and Perrysburg Junior High STEM Lab for always helping out the podcast. Thanks for listening. We'll see you next time.